Greetings to my friends in Franklin. I'm so grateful that I can be with you today and next week. You know that before the pandemic shut things down the way that it has, I was scheduled to be in Franklin today and next week. And I'm glad that we can at least be together in this way. So I'll be providing the sermon for the Zoom service today and next Sunday. And also next Sunday, the 13th, I will actually be in Franklin to celebrate the grass mass with you. And I'm just so grateful to have those opportunities, despite all the limitations of these difficult days. A couple of years ago, late in the summer, Sharon and I spent a couple of days at Niagara on the lake. We went up there to see some plays and to enjoy that quaint little village and the beautiful countryside around it. We booked a room in a bed and breakfast, which was actually a small home in a suburban development. So there were 3 bedrooms, so there could be up to 3 couples staying there. And we drove into the driveway of this bed and breakfast and noticed the cars of the other 2 folks who were staying there when we were. One of them had an NRA sticker on it. The other one had a World Wildlife Federation sticker on it. And I thought, well, this will probably make for some interesting conversations around the breakfast table. As it turned out, one of the couples was a Jewish couple from Chicago. The other one was a Unitarian couple from Indiana, one of whom said that he was an atheist. Our hostess, the owner of the bed and breakfast, was a Muslim woman from the Middle East whose husband had business in Toronto, and this was what she had for her business. So there we were at the breakfast table the mornings that we stayed, 2 Episcopalians, 2 Jews, and 2 Unitarians, one of whom was an atheist and a Muslim. Did it make for interesting conversations? Well, most of the time we talked about the plays we were going to see or where we had gone to dinner or places that we had traveled, all of us in our lives. We were all about the same age. And we also talked a lot about ways that our 3 congregations, 1 Episcopalian, 1 Jewish, 1 Unitarian, ways that our 3 congregations were reaching out into our communities and trying to serve those in need. That's mostly what we talked about. And our Muslim hostess joined right in to the conversations. And so at one point, I found myself, after we'd had a couple of days together at the breakfast table, I found myself saying, I think there's something that we all agree on around this table. And that is, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the Unitarian, atheist, said, I absolutely agree with that. Love your neighbor as yourself. When Jesus was asked to summarize the entire law, to boil it all down to its core principles, he said there are 2. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But St. Paul reduces it all the way to just that second one. As we heard in today's epistle reading from Romans, Paul says the entire law is summed up in this word, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, sometimes people will say to me, aren't all the different religions and different views and ways of life, aren't they all just different roads going to the same place? Aren't they all different roads going up the same mountain? Won't all of these different religions and ways of practicing life, won't they all eventually get to the same place? Aren't they just many roads to heaven? And I have to confess that what I usually say is what I believe is that I'm not smart enough to know if that's true or not. It's way above my pay grade. But it's obvious from experiences like the one that we had around that breakfast table that there are many ways to get to the principle of loving your neighbor as yourself. The Christian way is very clear. Because of Jesus, because of his death and resurrection, we have been given an understanding of God, that God is love. Not that God is loving as though God were something else and loving were one of the things that God does, but that God is love. God's very being is love. And as Paul wrote in another place in Romans that we heard earlier this summer, there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. And we are invited to trust that God is love and that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And then, and only then, we try, however imperfectly, to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. That's how we get to that point of loving our neighbors as ourselves. And if we find that others have gotten there along with us and arrived at the same place, then we should be grateful and rejoice, because surely God is in that. And we have found there, in loving our neighbors as ourselves, we have found a common ground that we can live by, even in these difficult days.